Masterfully done.
So John Macdonald is my guest today, and welcome, John. John is a Canadian artist, well-known, internationally well-known Canadian artist, and I'm delighted to be here in his Salt Spring studio.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you and see all your work.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of work on the go right now. I'm just finishing off a lot of work for a show that I'm having in Winnipeg. This is probably the most naturalistic one of all three. So here he is on the banks of a river, fly fishing, and I like the idea of taking his form on the side of the river and just taking it and making it more imaginary somehow, making it more about maybe weather patterns or thoughts or dimensions, different dimensions. So I mutated it into this image right here, and these are done in oil on a very cheap wall paneling. And the wall paneling is something that I just got at the lumber store, and it was something that was given to me, and they said they weren't going to sell it to me because it was just a packaging material. So it had a texture to it. It looks like cedar, and I was trying to emulate the idea that when the Group 7, when they were painting a lot of the times, they would work on whiskey boxes that they would break apart and use. It was, again, a ready-made material. It was cheap, and it was portable, and it was small, so they could work on top of it. So I was trying to emulate that and pull that into this in a contemporary context, and then work up different layers. So I was also trying to take the colors and take them and, again, kind of wrap them up a little bit. I was lying the images flat and pouring paint on, so I would be pouring things. I took large sheets of plastic, and I would put them on top of the wet paint, and then I would cut things out, pour some more, pull the plastic slightly, pull it off. So I ended up with these types of shapes coming out. So some areas would be masked out, other parts would be moved around with a squeegee, so I would take a squeegee and move it around. Some things are very deliberate, and other things are absolutely accidental. So for me, it's trying to navigate and negotiate with those two different things going on. What can I get to work? What isn't working? And trying to make it work overall. And then at the end, I might go in with a very small brush and just do little, I wouldn't tell most people this, but do little touch-ups in a few places to just finish off things in a certain way. Like this part right here, I'm particularly happy with on this paint here. So I've got 3 or 4 different layers going simultaneously. And then, so this is another one of Tom Thompson, and I'm not sure who this individual right here is. I was never quite able to figure out who that is.
And that was also that one was also from a reference photo?
These are all from reference photos, at least the initial images. This one is probably the most descriptive image I've done, in the sense that the face looks like, it's not photographic, but it looks much more representational than some of the other ones. This one here is Tom Thompson in a canoe, and he's almost gone. You can hardly even tell that that's an individual there. But I was playing with the paint, building up layers, again putting things down, pulling it off, masking things off, swiping things down. This painting, incidentally, is done with acrylic on panel, whereas the other ones are oil. So, and there's another one here. That's quite an iconic image of Tom Thompson, very meditative. He's bent over looking at something. So again, I was trying to do this. I was trying to get away from the nostalgia of these images and put them into a more contemporary context and how they are situating themselves.
John, what are we looking at now?
So this is all packed up and ready to go into the show. So it's Emily Carr. It's a stock image of Emily Carr in her early years. She's on horseback, and so she looks very kind of regal. She has a beautiful hat on, and I tried to make it feel. I don't know. I was just trying to get a feeling of her as she was this a woman by herself most of the time, going off into different native villages, painting and drawing and taking boats up, to different areas by herself. So I was just trying to maybe capture a little bit of that spirit of her without it being really descriptive of her in a certain specific sense. I didn't want to put forms in here that you go, oh, that's an Emily Carr form. I just wanted to maybe get something from her interior a little bit. And so I did these big shapes on here, and I built up all these different layers interlacing together. Some of my favorite passages on here, say for example this blob of paint here, I painted it flat and then I put it up, and at nighttime it cracked and dripped down to here. So I like the idea of the painting itself at night.
And Emily Carr was one of the first painters that made registered for you.
Well, she was one of the very first artists that I think I was aware of, and certainly she was painting local images, local scenes, trees. She had a very dark aspect to her work in a certain way, and they weren't, it'd be the light and the dark. They're beautiful, but they also had a sense of mystery to them. And you'd see a forest, you'd see the trees, and you'd be going, well, I wonder what's down there. It's not necessarily, it's very awe-inspiring, but also not necessarily the most, how would you call it, inviting, paint images where they just logged. So they'd have she'd paint a lone tree. So she was an environmentalist even back in 1920 or something like that. So she had that aspect to her creative output and the way she was thinking about nature and about how things are going in this part of the world. So, I am of the school of what the Canadian artist Gordon Smith said. His influences are 100 artists deep. And when I read that he'd said that, I totally could relate to him in that way, in the fact that, I've always loved lots of art. I love lots of things. I love photorealism. I like conceptual art. I like all kinds of different things. And I see all those different isms or whatnot as things there that you can potentially draw on, hopefully not copy, but draw on a little bit, and use for yourself with your own exploration of different things, and as inspiration as well. It's I'd love it, when you're dead, that people are actually still looking at your work and being inspired by it in some way, as opposed to no, you've done that a long time ago and you're not relevant anymore. So it's
So what's over here?
Well, there's another image right here, and this is a little bit different. This one on the front. This isn't part of this greater body of work that I'm working on right now. This is a painting I did a couple of years ago, and it's probably 3 or 4 years ago. I went hunting with my brother up to the Nation Lakes, and we went up for about a week, and we were canoeing and having a great time. And I'm not a hunter myself, but I went along and I had my little paint box with me, and I was doing paintings. And one evening, when we were inside my brother's prospector's tent that he just bought it. It was brand new. We had a beautiful fire in it as well, with a stovepipe coming out. He took a photograph of me strumming a guitar. Well, I don't play guitar. I'd like to play guitar, but when I saw the image, I thought, oh, that's great. So I titled this one "The Self-Portrait of Myself as Neil Young." I really appreciate Neil Young's music, so I just thought this close as I'm going to get to playing a guitar and being able to document that.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Did you enjoy painting it?
I did actually. It isn't always a joy painting. I find painting difficult, and I think that's probably one of the things I find attractive about painting. If it was really easy, I don't know if I'd be that interested in it. There's got to be, for me, a little bit of push and pull going on. It's just sort of like Emily Carr's paintings. They're beautiful, and there's a lightness, but there's also a darkness to it. So there's an opposite at play at all times. So that's like a lot of these parts of the painting were quite fast for me, and other parts took me a while. And other times, with any painting, I'll sit and look at it for hours and meditate and just think of what I need to do with this to shift it around. So it's a balance between spontaneity and contemplation.
What does it feel like when it's finished?
It feels really good when it's done. It's nice to have the paintings finished and then out, and then I'm not at all attached to my work. So after a painting's done, it'd be sad if it got destroyed, but I try not to be attached to the materiality of things. I just try to let things go. It goes out into the world, if someone buys it, and hopefully they'll look after it. It's in their collection, but I'm not an artist who is worrying about that. That's not my business, and I don't want it to be my business. I think it would seize me up somehow, so I don't want to be in that place. So this is the my Neil Young portrait, and then behind here is
what's behind there?
I'll just pull this aside. It's a painting of Tom Thompson, and he's in a canoe with a party of ladies either coming to shore or going off, and it's painted, quite loosely. Obviously, this is an 8 by 8 foot oil on wood panel. And,
so, for the benefit of people who are viewing on a small screen, it's possible for me to see the images of the ladies. Perhaps if you point them out that'll help a little bit. You can see their hats there. Yeah,
what I'm trying to do is, a lot of times, I don't want a lot of a painting to come at you right away. Hopefully a painting for me is compelling immediately, but you don't necessarily see everything immediately. So when you're looking at it, you might look at it and you go, oh, there's a person there. I didn't see that person. So these things kind of unfold, and then on the other hand, I don't want it to be just about what is being described. I want the paintbrush marks, which are ultimately the main subject matter of any painting. If you're a painter, it's how the paint's put on, how it's layered up, how the figure relates to the ground, what is done, what is undone. This painting I tried to do as little as possible to get the effect I wanted. So I did this, and I'm conscious of the fact that I don't want to finish this off too much. I don't want this to compete with the main figure of Tom Thompson right here. So, it's being a painter for me has been, in a sense, you're very concerned about certain things, but other things to a lot of people might come across as being negligent. But it's a conscientious negligence, I would say, is what I'm after when I'm trying to make a piece of art.
I have to assume, as an outsider to your world, that your trust in that has evolved over time. Is that true, or not so much? Well, I'm curious, because that your trust at leaving things out or leaving things partly seen.
Well, I think they used to say, I remember reading something somewhere, and they were talking about expressionist painters, which I could probably be put in that camp of a little bit. And they were saying that expressionist painters quite often are better when they're younger. And I can understand that in the sense that, you have to be able to trust in your senses. And I find even with myself that I don't quite trust in my senses quite the same way as I did when I was 30 or 40. I question things more. And when you're trying to paint loosely, that can bring a little bit of hesitancy into the work. And hesitancy when you're painting isn't necessarily the best thing to have there. It depends on what you're doing. I mean, if I was painting in a different way or had a different idea of what I was trying to evolve, maybe that would be the perfect thing for me. But because I'm working the way I do, I don't know that that is the best thing.
John, you're going to show us the photographs that you used as reference work for this show.
Yes, these are images. It was actually quite difficult to come across images of the group of 7 that I felt were new and compelling. And I found a few new ones, but a number of them were also older, more well-known images. This one I found very interesting. It's of Tom Thompson, and this is a poster that I downloaded from the internet, but it shows Tom. And as they know with Tom Thompson, they don't know whether he died by someone's hand or whether he drowned. But here he is, he's standing behind a barbed wire fence with his day's catch, the fish with blood running down, and I'm visualizing him wearing something similar to what I'm wearing right now, a red jacket, or a Mac jacket, in this sunset or sunrise.
And is this from that painting?
This is the source image for the painting there.
Okay, so why don't you tell us about that painting now? This would be a good time to go into that painting.
Now, this painting I worked on up and over a number of months. So this is the image done from the source image. I found the photograph of him. As I found a number of the photographs quite kind of banal. So when you saw them, you look at it and go, okay, well that's just, it could be anybody out anywhere. How can I give this thing some life? How can I reinvigorate it with some life? You're basically taking something that's black and white, faded, and put some color in it, as the group of 7, particularly Tom Thompson, I think, was known as a colorist. So I was trying to get some more of the color in. And then I decided, for reasons only I know, to put these sort of leafed or orbed shapes over him. So I sort of got a little maybe carried away with it, but I started moving them around, and sometimes I'll cut out little pieces of paper and with paint on them, and I'll stick them in certain places just to get a sense of placement before I actually commit myself to doing something. So I'll basically meditate on that, move things around, and this built up over a number of months. And then I decided right from the beginning that I wanted to not have this as a regular shaped canvas. I had found these old doors, and I decided that I wanted to incorporate these into it. Doors are symbols for coming and going, or they can be a barrier, or they can be an entranceway into another reality or a different space. So I like the idea of these being these doors could be opened, and they also had a hint towards modern art with the juxtaposition of how they're sitting on top of each other. They're a little bit like the American painter Ellsworth Kelly, I thought, but sort of a mutated Ellsworth Kelly, because Ellsworth Kelly would do his paintings and they'd be very beautiful, austere, and minimal. And these are nothing like that. They're totally the opposite of an Ellsworth Kelly.
So that's now. What about the next one? Is there a reference photo for this other one that we're about to look at?
Yeah, the reference photo for this one here. This is a more recently found image, and this is Tom. I'm not sure. I read it a year ago, but I can't remember exactly where it is. But this is Tom driving a wagon with a number of ladies in it, and I was just very intrigued with this because I just don't. I guess there are references to him having a lady friend, but just him with a bunch of ladies out in the country, I just didn't think of him like that somehow. So again, here's Tom with the wagon, and as I was painting it, as with a lot of paintings I'm working on, I'll be working along, and I won't be thinking about anything at a certain moment, and then I'll go, oh, this wheel, I don't know, it reminds me of another artist. And of course, afterwards I thought, no, it reminds me of some of Vincent van Gogh's paintings. He did a painting in Arles of a wagon with a wagon wheel on it. So I decided to paint in the color tones of Vincent van Gogh. After all, Tom Thompson didn't paint that much later than Vincent van Gogh, and he would be also probably considered a post-impressionist in a certain way. So I was trying to pull that influence into the wagon, and of course it's got the ladies on here. And this is probably one of the only images I've done where I decide to keep a little bit of the reference to the photography, the actual source image. So this is painted not photorealistically, but it has just a hint of that. I wanted to have that in just as an acknowledgement of the source material. And so I would be working on this and scraping it off and building it up. And this particular piece, it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to finish it. So, but anyhow, I'm happy with how it is now.
So you added the sides as well.
Again, I put the sides on here as a sort of a formal thing, and also it acts as a tonal, gives a nice color balancing for it. And this is painted entirely differently. This was done with a paint lacquer. So I poured the paint onto the thing and lifted it and moved it around and used a squeegee on it in different places, and just had a little bit of fun.
So why this image? Why did you find this, each of these images you found compelling, I'm sure for a particular reason, that you chose to go further forward with them? Because otherwise we can see lots of images and they don't do anything for us, and then we see the occasional image and it does do something. It does spark something.
I liked the dynamic of the wagon breaking through this power pole. This is actually in the photograph a power pole. So I like that formal aspect of that, and I saw it as a formal means of me being able to anchor the painting in a framed way, and it was also an anchor to give the horizontal and verticals in the painting some stability. So it was more of a formal consideration in that way, but primarily it was this whole idea of him being out and about in a wagon. I just didn't envision him being really that social somehow.
Was there a reference that inspired you in this direction?
Just I have this photograph here that I found on the internet.
Take us through this.
This is when I was a kid, I remember being out with my friends, and we were scavenging along at nighttime, and there was a store being built at the end of the street, and it was nighttime, and we went into the store down into the basement, and it was absolutely just it wasn't even to lock up phase, this place. So we go in and we're just playing around as kids would. And then I went out onto this brand new minted curb. And I'm walking along this curb. I walk along, my friends are behind me. And then I turned around. And at the moment I turned around, I looked up into the sky, and I saw an orb flash through the sky, a fireball, twice as big as our sun. Flames, and it disappeared. And I was just reflecting on the fact that I know they track with satellites and with telescopes. They track the known universe. The scientists claim to know when meteors are coming to hit our planet or cause different potential destructive occurrences. But anyhow, when I was starting to paint this, I just liked the idea of painting the elements in the sky, the universe, with instead of, I was originally going to put a sun up here, and then I thought I'm going to put a few different things in the sky, known and unknown, and they could be the same thing with a time lapse going on. And then I tried to have this feeling of it being cut and pasted a little bit. But anyhow, this is supposed to, for me, this is a depiction of Arthur Lindsmere in his canoe, and he's perhaps come across a moose. And I painted this with spray foam initially, and then worked up onto it with acrylics, and later oil. I painted the moose's heart here and tried to have different things going on to emulate water. Now, the reason I use something as eccentric as spray foam was, for myself, I've noticed a lot of Arthur Linsmere's paintings, particularly some of his smaller sketches, the way he uses paint, the way he blobs paint up and clogs it up in different passages, reminded me of spray foam. And so, I mean, I was doing a construction project on my own house, and I was using it, and I went, oh, that reminds me of Arthur Linsmere. So this is a reference to him in a certain way, and I just like the whole feeling too. The moose with his antlers, they're like you know, antennas, and the moose is registering different sensations that, and living and breathing and being in our world. And experiencing our world in a different way than we do. So I was just trying to get a little bit of that into there, and yeah, that's
spectacular, absolutely spectacular. Now, John, I asked you to hold this one back because the first time I saw it, I said I'd love that, and it's Emily Carr again, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Emily Carr. She had a caravan.
And this is your reference? And
this is the reference to the caravan. She had this caravan, and it's on a transparency. And she would go out in her caravan, her painting caravan, and go on day trips with the horses or whatnot. And she would have this to obviously sleep in and be in. And again, I tried to take the stock image that is a well-known image. A lot of these images in here, in the history of this group of people, are well-known images. But I tried to take it and just give it a new life to it, to zip it up a little bit with how I was trying to paint it and
what it would. So what would it have been like for her as you imagine her experience? Well,
she would go out and paint, and she was rather an eccentric by the standards of her time. She was rather eccentric personality. So she would go out and paint and do her different things. And she had a pet monkey that she would have, and she had dogs, and then she would do her artwork, which was. To the people of Victoria at that time, it was quite, out there. It was relatively eccentric. She had a very small following of people who appreciated her work. One of the people who really appreciated her work was with Lauren Harris. In her later life, Lauren Harris and herself were in close communication, and he was very supportive of her and her work. So.
You've got to think that she would appreciate that because, not only her time, but as a woman, that, as I imagine that feeling, it could be a bit lonely.
I think she must have been quite a lonely person, actually. I can't imagine, she ran her boarding house for 15 years and gave up painting in that period of time. And, I think also, just having all those animals must have been her companions, animals are, I think for a lot of people, a very important aspect of their life. So I think having an animal as relatively eccentric as having a monkey is kind of, I'd like to have a monkey actually. I think it'd be kind of cool.
And yet, one of the things I like is how much color and how much vibrancy that you're bringing forward in all of these.
Yeah, for me, it's for me the amount of color I put in is in relation to how I'm trying to make it sing a little bit. So if I have a part of the painting that isn't really working, I usually try to work it out either tonally or coloristically. So a lot of these paintings are chromatically really, quite rich. And they're definitely paintings that, up close, when you look at the surfaces, they're relatively thick. I do use a relatively a lot of paint, and but then they're also quite illusionistic in a certain sense. Very similar, I would say, to some of the impressionist ways of using paint. So I put paint on and I blur things out and I smudge things out with the hopes that at 10 or 15 feet away, that at that moment things will come together in a certain way. Now, having said that, I'm not trying to create that, a really real space. Hopefully, it's more of an emotional space that I'm creating, not visually. So.
What are we looking at now, John?
This is another image, a stock image that was of Tom Thompson, and it originally from the image had Arthur Linsmere at the far end here. I decided to focus it in, and I just wanted to have an image of Tom Thompson. But this painting was. It's actually quite a thick painting. It's very abstract. So when you're up close, you really don't see anything other than paint. A lot of the color marks on it were done with a spoon. I would load up my spoon with paint, and I would stand about 15 feet away and flick at the canvas. Strangely enough, you would think that you would be fairly accurate with that, but when I first started doing it, I was hitting the ceiling. You can see actually up in my studio up here, there's a big red blob up there. That's from my early attempts doing this. So I was playing around a lot with this, and a lot of the paint of how it was applied. My daughter had a horse a couple of years ago for 4 or 5 years. And one day I was walking along and I saw this pile of hair on the ground, and it was the horse tail. So I took the horse tail and I gutted a new brush, put the horse tail in here, and had this beautiful striper brush. So a lot of this sort of axe murder slashing brush marks that are going on here are done with this horse tail. And again, I'm trying to, in a way, make reference to the fact with this that they don't know what happened to Tom Thompson. He maybe was killed by someone. They don't know, when or how. So this is a subtle, not so subtle reference to potentially that, and it's also a reference to the fact that I'm wearing a similar sort of shirt. I'm trying to go with that Canadiana feel and have that in there, laced together. So this is laced together. And again, with this here, I was doing this. I decided to do a sun, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, I thought a sun reflected in the water there, yellow, is just too obvious, so I decided to make it green for whatever reason. And this lecture hall, I decided I had this image of the lecture hall with all the people, and the original image had the image over here of the professor giving the lecture, all the students sitting here, all of them with their different laptop computers. So this painting was essentially a poured painting. I started pouring the paint, and I wanted the image to be a very slow draw. I didn't want you to necessarily see what was going on right away. And in fact, you stand in front of it, and it takes just a little bit of time for it to unfold as to what's there. So I put animals in it and different things, and I've got on the screens, I've got an image, different images of Tom Thompson and some of their paintings. And over here, I've got either a computer screen or it could be a color field painting. And I'm trying to make reference to the fact that these are students, probably younger people, studying art, but how they're studying art and how they're interfacing with reality is a little different now than it was even when I was growing up. So people are learning different things now in different ways, using different mediums. And how is that translating into today's vocabulary? That's what I was trying to reference.
And what will come? Will it affect, inevitably it will affect how art evolves as well.
It could affect definitely how art evolves. I've always been a painter because I love the tactile quality of the materials. I like using paint. I like making things with my own hands. So when you're actually working on a computer screen, it is definitely drier. It's a very dry, to my mind, process, but it's a very important process, and so there's a lot to be drawn from that is very relevant. And well, it'd be interesting to see. A lot of people do very interesting art now using different technology, but it'd be interesting to see even in the future how that even evolves even more.
So this is connected with the work that you're doing now and the show that you'll be doing, and then in terms of its references, and then there's another painting behind there that's also connected, even though it's not of the group of 7. Can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, this one's a little more. What do you call it? It's more of a conceptual piece, I would imagine, in the sense that it's Tom Thompson, one of his relatives, I can't quite remember who it was, but was involved with the Museum of Natural History, or it could have been the Royal Ontario Museum, and they were one of the head people of the department there doing research and being involved with that. So I was trying to envision Tom Thompson being there maybe when he was a young guy and being introduced to the nature, but from the vantage point of more of a scientific angle, scientific inquiry. So in doing this, I painted it. This is an image of my daughter in the museum up in Prince George when she was probably about 10 years old, and she's standing in front of one of these. I don't know exactly what they're called, but when you put your hand on it, electricity comes to it. So I like the idea of that, and the fact that our being, our heart is generated. I mean, it's electricity interfacing with. I don't know what I was going to say.
Chemicals and stuff.
Chemicals. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest electrical generators we have.
One of the biggest electrical generators. So this is also part of how things work. So I had some big tusks here. I put Tom's name in here, and then at the last minute I decided I was going to paint a deer across the foreground here. And then I decided also, when I was working on that, I was going to put a grid on it to, in its own way, reference the idea of measuring things. The grid isn't quite correct. It goes off in different places, so I like the fact that even scientific inquiry isn't necessarily right on with its inquiry. What Leonardo da Vinci was doing, was thinking of as being scientific, probably wouldn't quite be considered scientific now. So, as you were saying to me earlier, in 500 years from now, maybe what we're doing isn't considered, the same. So, but this is a little different than some of the other pieces, and this is a work that was a long time in the making. I think I worked on this for probably 3 years anyway. So lots of layers built up to it.
And has that been, you've been thinking about this show and working with this group of 7 show for quite a while now? Yeah,
it's been probably 3 years that I've been working on the body of work. So it's been quite a while. But I've been working on other things at the same time. So I'll work on certain pieces and then work on other ones later on. So
you've had this will be your 3rd show this year, or your 2nd show?
This is my 2nd show this year,
which is quite a bit.
Well, it can be. I mean, it depends. I go through periods where I've had more shows and less shows. I've had periods where I do more work and less work. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, I had about 100 paintings on the go at one time, and I did manage to finish off 98 of them. So it was quite a bit of work. So.
And this will be in Winnipeg?
It's in Winnipeg, and it's going to be either probably October or November sometime. We haven't nailed down an exact date for the show, but
so you've shown throughout Canada and beyond.
Where have I shown? I've shown in Hollywood, California, and I've shown in New York, Los Angeles. Had numbers of shows in Montreal and Toronto and Winnipeg. So mostly in North America, and a few shows in Europe. So mostly.
And some of your work, I remember when I worked in high-rise buildings years ago, some of those high-rise buildings have some of your work in them. There's...
Where?
The Bentall Centre, Vancouver?
Bentall Centre, They have a big painting of mine. It's a large painting. And
TD Bank, don't they have?
Toronto Dominion Bank has a few of my pieces. And Shaw Cable, I didn't realize it, but a couple of years ago, J.R. Shaw was here visiting, and he came with my dealer Doug Udell, and they sat and we drank wine for a few hours, and then he ended up buying a painting, which was fabulous. And I thought it was the only painting that he owned of mine, but then I discovered later on that he had a number of paintings, and there's apparently a John Macdonald room in the Shaw, a big skyrise in Calgary.
That's pretty spectacular.
It's kind of fun, actually. Yeah, it is.
It was a delight to spend time with John in his Salt Spring studio as he described to us how he sees